poor food truck girl ignored the vampire king in line until he whispered, "Still remember me?" Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into our story. On a rainy afternoon in downtown New Orleans, the food truck line was long as usual, the scent of hot gumbo, fresh tacos, and sizzling burgers filling the air. The day had been slow, and Jenna, a young food truck vendor, couldn't help but feel worn out. Her hands ached from flipping burgers and serving fries, her apron stained with grease and sauces from hours of working. She wasn't used to being so tired. It was a typical Thursday, or so she thought, until a tall man approached the counter. He stood in line like any other customer, his sharp features hidden under the brim of his dark hat. He wore a black leather jacket, his eyes concealed behind sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. Jenna barely noticed him at first. She was busy trying to make the next order for the waiting customers, her thoughts consumed with making it through the shift. As she handed a bag of food to the customer in front of him, she didn't even glance at the man. She simply gestured for him to order, but his silence caught her attention. She looked up briefly, meeting his gaze for a split second, but then quickly turned away, assuming he was just another regular. Jenna had seen plenty of strangers, and honestly, she didn't have the energy to care about anyone today. The man stood still, watching her, but his expression remained unreadable. There was something about him, something unusual, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She brushed it off, returning to her routine. However, as she prepared the next meal, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching her. It wasn't that his stare was overtly intense, but there was something magnetic about his presence. A few moments later, as she slid a plate of food across the counter, the man stepped forward. Without a word, he placed his order in a soft, almost too smooth voice, asking for a simple coffee and sandwich. Jenna nodded, still not thinking much of him, though his voice did send a brief shiver down her spine. She turned to prepare his order, but then, just as she was about to hand it over, he said something that made her freeze. "Still remember me?" The words were so soft, yet they carried an eerie weight. Jenna's heart skipped a beat. She looked at him, eyes wide, suddenly struck by the realization that she had heard those words before, but from where? Had she met him before? His face was unfamiliar, yet his voice felt hauntingly familiar. He smiled faintly, as if he could see the confusion in her eyes. The air between them seemed to shift, a chill settling over her despite the warm summer evening. The other customers were still chatting and waiting for their food, oblivious to the tension that had suddenly thickened the air. She blinked, trying to process what was happening. How did he know those words would affect her? She had to admit, she wasn't the type to get nervous around strangers, but this was different. This felt personal, like something from her past that she couldn't remember. She handed him the food and coffee, her fingers brushing his hand briefly, sending a strange jolt through her. He didn't say another word. Instead, he nodded in gratitude and stepped away, disappearing into the crowd. Jenna stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. Who was he? And why did his words feel so familiar? She shook her head, trying to shake off the unease, but something told her this encounter wasn't just a random interaction. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. Little did she know, this man was not just a customer, but someone who had been watching her for far longer than she could imagine. The next day, Jenna could not shake the strange feeling that had settled in her chest. The words "still remember me" kept replaying in her mind over and over again, like a song that wouldn't leave. She had spent the night tossing and turning, trying to figure out why his voice, those words, felt so familiar. But no matter how hard she thought, she couldn't recall ever meeting him. It was as if a veil had been drawn over that part of her memory, and she couldn't get through it. She had worked at the food truck for years, but no one, not even the regulars, had ever made her feel like this. She opened the food truck early that morning, hoping the routine would distract her, but it didn't. The busy traffic of downtown New Orleans seemed louder than usual today. Every honk, every conversation, felt like it was vibrating through her skull. As the first customers arrived, Jenna tried to focus on the task at hand, serving burgers and fries with a smile, but her mind kept drifting back to the tall, mysterious man. What did he want? And why had he said those words? Around noon, the line was long, but Jenna barely noticed it. Her hands worked automatically, passing out orders, checking the grill, and refilling the condiments. She glanced up and froze. There he was again, standing in line, as if nothing had changed. He was still wearing the same black leather jacket and dark sunglasses, his posture as confident and imposing as before. He was different from any customer she had ever seen, not just because of his clothes or his quiet demeanor, but because of how he made everything around him feel. It was like the entire food truck was suddenly just a small piece in his world, and she was the one who was out of place. Jenna quickly turned her gaze away, trying to push the unease down. She couldn't afford to be distracted. She had bills to pay, rent to make, and she couldn't let a random encounter with a stranger mess with her head. But as he stepped up to the counter, she felt it again, that strange pull in her chest, like her heart was beating a little faster. He didn't immediately speak, just waited for her to finish serving the person in front of him. His presence seemed to fill the space, even though he said nothing. Jenna handed over the food and tried to smile, but it felt forced. "How's your day going?" she asked, trying to sound normal, like she always did. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly took the bag from her and looked at her, his gaze steady and intense. Jenna swallowed, trying to calm the flutter in her stomach. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low but clear. "You really don't remember me?" The words hit her again, like a punch to the gut. She could feel her pulse quicken. His eyes, there was something in them, something familiar, but she couldn't place it. It was almost like he was reading her mind, like he could sense the confusion and fear swirling inside her. She stepped back slightly, as if instinctively putting distance between them. "I'm sorry, but I don't," she said, her voice shaky, though she tried to make it sound firm. "I think you have the wrong person." He didn't react immediately. For a moment, there was a tense silence between them. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured her. It was the kind of smile that made her feel like she was missing something important. "I see," he said softly, and there was something in his tone that made her feel as if she had failed some kind of test. He turned to leave, but just before he stepped away, he dropped a small card on the counter. Jenna looked at it, then back at him, but he was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd. The card was simple, black with elegant, gold lettering. Lucien Voss. No title, no other words, just his name. Jenna stared at it for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. What was this? Who was he? And why had he left her this? She felt a chill run down her spine as she tucked the card into her apron, her mind racing. She had to know more. It was driving her crazy. Over the next few days, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about Lucien Voss, the man who seemed to know her, even though she had no idea who he was. She had to find out more. She had to know why he had come into her life. It wasn't just the encounter that unsettled her. It was the way his presence seemed to linger long after he was gone. The way his words seemed to wrap themselves around her, like they were meant to lead her somewhere, even if she didn't know where. Jenna knew one thing for sure. Her life had just changed, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this man was at the center of it. The next few days were a blur for Jenna. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Lucien Voss haunted her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him, something hidden beneath the surface. She had kept the card he gave her in her apron, the one with the name Lucien Voss printed in gold. At night, she would take it out and stare at it, wondering what it meant, what connection he had to her. It was late one evening, after the food truck had closed, when Jenna made up her mind. She couldn't live with this mystery any longer. She had to know more about him, so she decided to visit the address listed on the back of the card. The rain had started to pour heavily as she made her way to the address, her sneakers slipping on the slick sidewalks of New Orleans. It wasn't far from where she worked, just a few blocks down in the business district. The address led her to a tall, dark building, one of those old, imposing structures that seemed to have a life of its own. She felt an odd shiver run through her as she stood in front of the building. It was just a building, but something about it felt different. She pushed the heavy door open, which creaked loudly in protest, and stepped into the lobby. The interior was just as grand as the exterior. Marble floors, grand chandeliers, and the faint scent of something rich and old lingered in the air. There was no reception desk, no signs, nothing that indicated this was a public space. The only thing she could hear was the sound of her own breath as she stood there, unsure of what to do next. Before she could take another step, the elevator doors opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in an expensive suit, his face emotionless, but his eyes sharp and calculating. He looked at Jenna, and for a moment, their gazes locked. She felt her heart skip a beat, recognizing the intensity in his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth, almost like velvet. Jenna froze, not knowing how to respond. She had come here to find answers, but now, in the face of someone so intimidating, she wasn't sure what to say. "I'm looking for Lucien Voss," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. The man raised an eyebrow, his gaze never leaving hers. "Lucien Voss is a private person. Are you sure you want to see him?" Jenna nodded, gathering what little courage she had left. "Yes, I need to speak with him." The man stepped aside and motioned for her to follow him. They walked down a long hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silence. At the end of the hallway, the man stopped in front of a large door. He knocked twice before pushing it open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the city skyline through the tall windows. There, standing by the window, was Lucien Voss. He turned around as they entered, his eyes immediately locking onto Jenna's. He said nothing at first, just watched her closely, as if reading her every thought. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the pressure building in the room. "You came," he said softly, his voice colder than she remembered. Jenna nodded but couldn't find her voice. She had come for answers, but now that she was standing in front of him, she wasn't sure where to start. "I needed to know who you are," she said finally, her words coming out rushed. "I don't understand. How do you know me?" Lucien stepped forward, his presence overpowering, and as he did, Jenna couldn't help but feel a strange pull towards him. He was too perfect, too dangerous. "You don't remember me?" he asked again, his tone now more curious than before. Jenna shook her head, feeling a mix of confusion and fear. "No, I don't," she whispered. Lucien looked at her for a moment, his gaze softening ever so slightly. "Perhaps I haven't explained myself properly," he said, taking a step closer. "Let me tell you, Jenna, we've met before. Many years ago, but you were too young to remember." Jenna's heart raced as the pieces started to fall into place, but she couldn't quite put them together. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien took a deep breath, as if preparing to share something heavy. "You were just a child when we first crossed paths. You don't remember, but I never forgot you." Jenna's mind was spinning. She had no memory of meeting him as a child, and yet something about his words felt right. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lucien smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "I think you know exactly what I'm saying, Jenna," he said softly, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're not just anyone to me. You never were." Jenna's knees felt weak as the room seemed to close in around her. Her mind raced, trying to understand what he was telling her. What did he mean? Was this all just a game to him? Or was there something deeper, something more sinister at play? She had no answers, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. Lucien stood in front of Jenna, his presence almost overwhelming. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the way he observed her with an intensity that made every inch of her skin tingle. His words hung in the air, filling the room with a strange tension. He had said they had met before, many years ago, but Jenna couldn't remember any of it. She had no recollection of crossing paths with him as a child, and yet, something about his demeanor felt too familiar, too real. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what he had just said. She had to know more. "I don't understand," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could I have known you as a child? I don't even remember meeting you." Lucien's expression softened, just for a moment, before his gaze became more serious. He took a slow step forward, closing the gap between them. "It's a complicated story," he said, his voice lower now, more intimate. "One that you weren't meant to remember." Jenna swallowed hard, her throat dry. "What do you mean? Why would I forget?" Lucien let out a soft sigh, as if he had been expecting this question. He turned away slightly, his fingers brushing against the edge of the window, before facing her again. "You were part of something greater than you realized, something I've been trying to protect you from for years." But now, it's time you knew the truth. His words hit her like a wave, each one crashing over her as she tried to process what he was saying. What truth? She asked, her voice trembling. Lucien walked to the desk across the room, his movements graceful, almost predatory. He picked up a small, intricately carved box and set it down in front of her. This is the truth, he said softly. Jenna stared at the box, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. She wanted to open it, but she also felt a deep fear. What's inside? She asked. Lucien's eyes darkened, the room growing colder as he spoke. Inside is the key to who you truly are, Jenna. The reason you've been drawn into this world. You are not just some ordinary girl. You're tied to something ancient, something powerful. His words echoed in her mind. Ancient. Powerful. Her heart raced. Was he telling her the truth? She could hardly believe it, but at the same time, something deep inside her felt it. There was a part of her that wanted to run, to leave the room and forget this whole conversation. But another part of her, the part that had been restless and searching for answers, urged her to stay. Why me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien took a step closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. Because, Jenna, you are the descendant of a bloodline that has been hidden for centuries. You are connected to the ancient ones, and that connection makes you a key figure in a much larger world than you could ever imagine. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean, a key figure? What are you saying? Lucien reached out and gently placed his hand on top of hers, his touch sending a shockwave of electricity through her body. You're not just a food truck vendor, Jenna. You're the last of a long line of protectors, the only one who can stand against the forces that seek to destroy everything. She pulled her hand away, her heart pounding in her chest. Protectors? Forces? What are you talking about? Lucien exhaled, frustration flickering in his eyes. I can't explain everything all at once, but what you need to understand is this. There are those who would use your bloodline for power, for domination. And they've been hunting you for years. That's why I've been watching over you. To keep you safe. Jenna's mind spun. She could feel the weight of his words, but they didn't make sense. How could she, a simple girl from New Orleans, be part of something so important? I don't understand, she whispered again, her voice filled with confusion and fear. How could I possibly be the key to something like this? Lucien's gaze softened, and for a moment, his cold exterior seemed to crack. You were born into this world, Jenna. Your destiny was sealed long before you were ever born. The blood you carry runs through generations of warriors, those who fought to protect this realm from dark forces. And now, those forces are closing in, and they want you. She took a step back, her body trembling. No, this isn't possible, she said, shaking her head. I'm just a food truck girl. I'm just trying to get by. I don't want any part of whatever you're talking about. Lucien's eyes darkened again, his voice low but firm. You don't have a choice. Your bloodline has already chosen you. And no matter how hard you try to deny it, your place in this world is waiting for you. The room seemed to close in around her, her breath quickening as she struggled to make sense of everything. Lucien was right about one thing. Nothing in her life had ever felt the same since that day she met him. The world she had known was slipping away, and she was being pulled into something far bigger than she could ever have imagined. And there was no turning back. Lucien's words hung in the air like an invisible weight. Jenna's mind was racing, her thoughts colliding with the reality that was unfolding before her. She had never imagined that her life, so simple and routine, could be tied to something so vast, so dangerous. The truth Lucien had revealed to her was overwhelming, and she was struggling to grasp it all. I'm not a warrior, Lucien, she whispered, her voice shaking. I'm just a girl who sells food from a truck. This is too much. I don't know how to do what you're asking. Lucien didn't answer immediately. He studied her with a quiet intensity, as if searching for something in her expression. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. You don't have to do it alone, Jenna. That's why I'm here. You were born into this world, whether you accept it or not, and I've been watching over you for a reason. You have abilities, ones that you don't even realize yet. Jenna shook her head. I don't have any abilities. I'm just normal. Lucien smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured her. It was the smile of someone who knew something she didn't. You're more than normal, Jenna. You always have been. You just haven't unlocked it yet. Your bloodline is ancient, and it's been dormant for years. But the world is changing, and so are you. He took a step closer to her, his presence filling the room, the intensity of his gaze unwavering. I can help you unlock what's inside you. But first, you need to trust me. Jenna looked up at him, her heart pounding. Trust him? How could she trust him after everything he had said? After everything she had learned? I don't know if I can, she said softly. You want me to believe that I'm part of some ancient bloodline, that I have powers, that I'm supposed to be a protector. But none of this makes sense. Lucien's eyes softened for a moment, and he took another step closer. I know it's hard to believe, but you don't have to understand everything all at once. You just need to trust the process. Trust me. Jenna felt the tension in the room shift. There was something about the way he spoke, something in his tone that made her feel like he wasn't lying. But that didn't make it any easier to accept. She had spent her entire life as a food truck vendor, working hard just to survive, and now she was being told that she was part of something much larger than herself. Something she didn't feel ready for. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly, her voice cracking. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Lucien reached out and gently cupped her chin, tilting her head up to meet his gaze. You are strong enough, he said softly. You've always been strong. That's why you're here. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. For the first time since they had started talking, she felt a flicker of something inside her, something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was fear. But it was there, and it felt real. Lucien let his hand drop from her chin, taking a step back, giving her space to breathe. I don't expect you to understand it all right now, he said. But what I need you to do is trust me. Trust that I can help you, and that you're not alone in this. You have people who will fight alongside you. Jenna swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. She didn't know what this would mean for her, but one thing was clear. Her life was never going to be the same. So what do I do now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lucien smiled, a flicker of something almost like pride in his eyes. Now, we begin your training. We unlock your abilities and prepare you for what's to come. Jenna took a deep breath, her mind still reeling, but a sense of determination beginning to take root inside her. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She was ready to face it. No matter how strange, how impossible it seemed, she was ready. Lucien's smile widened. That's the spirit, he said, his voice warm. You're more powerful than you know, Jenna. And it's time you learn how to use that power. The next few days passed in a blur for Jenna. She had agreed to train with Lucien, unsure of what that really meant, but trusting him in a way she couldn't quite explain. Every night, he showed her more. How to control her breathing, how to sense the changes in the air, how to channel energy she never knew she had. It felt strange at first, as if she were learning a new language, but gradually, things began to click. She found herself moving faster, thinking quicker, her body responding to things she couldn't see but could feel. Lucien was patient with her, guiding her with a quiet confidence. He never pushed too hard, but Jenna could see that he was preparing her for something. Every moment felt like it had purpose, every action, every word he said, had weight. As much as she tried to stay grounded, Jenna couldn't ignore the feeling that something was coming. There was a tension in the air that couldn't be dismissed. The world around her felt different, more alive, more dangerous. Lucien had told her that her abilities were tied to her bloodline, something ancient and forgotten. She still didn't understand it fully, but she was starting to see the changes in herself. It was the first day of a new week when everything shifted. Lucien had taken her to an abandoned warehouse outside the city, a place that felt as old as the stories he had shared with her. The air was thick with dust and the remnants of long-forgotten machinery. Jenna stood in the center of the open space, her body tense with anticipation. Lucien stood across from her, his dark eyes watching her carefully. Today, we're going to see how far you've come, he said, his voice smooth but firm. I want you to focus. Everything you've learned so far, all the control, all the energy, use it. Jenna nodded, trying to steady her breathing. Her heart was racing, but she pushed the nerves aside. She didn't want to let him down. She didn't want to be weak. Lucien motioned for her to move. Start with what you feel. Focus on the ground beneath your feet. It's not just dirt or concrete. It's alive with energy. Tap into it. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The world around her faded, leaving only the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She felt the ground, the weight of it beneath her, the pulse that vibrated through her body. It was there, just beneath the surface. She reached out, gently pulling on it, like a thread being unraveled. A spark shot up her arm, and for a moment, she felt weightless, as if her entire being was tied to the earth itself. When she opened her eyes, the air around her seemed to shimmer with a faint glow. Lucien watched her with an unreadable expression. "Good," he said, his voice low. "Now, let's take it further." She could feel the energy pulsing inside her, responding to his words. Lucien extended his hand, and Jenna felt a pull, as if his very presence was drawing something out of her. "Focus on my hand. Focus on the space between us," he instructed. Jenna narrowed her gaze, concentrating on the invisible space between them. Slowly, the air between them began to ripple, like a breeze had passed through. She could feel the energy crackling, the power she was beginning to harness. Lucien's eyes narrowed as he extended his hand further. "Good, now push it back. Push that energy back at me." Jenna's heart skipped. The idea of controlling the force that pulsed inside her was overwhelming, but Lucien's calm presence steadied her. She took a deep breath and raised her hand, focusing on the energy that surged through her body. She could feel it building, rising within her chest like a storm, gathering strength. With a sharp exhale, she pushed her palm forward. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the space between them exploded in a rush of wind, knocking Lucien back a few steps. The force of it startled her, but she couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. Lucien's face was unreadable, but there was a flicker of approval in his eyes. "You did it," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You've unlocked the first step." Jenna stood there, panting, her chest heaving with the exertion of the moment. She couldn't believe it. She had done it. She had actually controlled the energy inside her, pushed it out with enough force to move him. She felt something shift inside her, a sense of power that she had never known. Lucien took a step forward, his expression now more serious. "This is just the beginning. There's much more you need to learn. But I'm impressed with how far you've come." Jenna swallowed hard, the reality of everything settling in. She wasn't just a food truck girl anymore. She was something else, something more. And the more Lucien showed her, the more she realized that her life had changed forever. As they made their way back to the city, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that the storm Lucien had mentioned, the one that would come for her, was drawing closer. She didn't know what it would look like or when it would arrive, but she could feel it in her bones. And when it came, she would be ready. The days that followed Jenna's first real taste of her power were a blur of training, revelations, and constant shifts in her understanding of the world. Lucien pushed her hard, but he was always there, a steady presence guiding her, helping her harness the energy inside her that was so new and yet so familiar. She could feel herself changing. The more she practiced, the more she could sense things around her. The air, the vibrations beneath her feet, the energy that pulsed from everything. It was all starting to make sense in ways she didn't expect. One evening, as they stood in the secluded training room Lucien had created for her, he spoke in a tone that was darker than usual. "It's time," he said. Jenna felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard that tone before, and it always came before something serious. "Time for what?" she asked, her voice slightly breathless, feeling the weight of the moment. Lucien gave her a knowing look, one that told her everything she needed to know. "The storm I warned you about. It's here. You're ready, Jenna. The forces hunting you will not wait any longer." She felt her heart skip a beat. She had known something was coming, but hearing it spoken out loud made it feel all too real. The thought of facing whatever threat was out there filled her with a mix of fear and determination. She had been training for this, but now it felt different. She wasn't just some girl anymore. She wasn't just Jenna from the food truck. She was someone with a purpose, and that purpose was about to collide with the world in ways she couldn't predict. Lucien's expression softened as he took a step toward her. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. "I'll be with you every step of the way. You're not alone in this. You have me, and you have your power." Jenna nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She was no longer the person who worked the food truck. The world she had known was gone, and in its place, there was something bigger, something she couldn't ignore. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear she felt inside. Lucien gave her a small smile, one that held a deep understanding. "We go to them. They've been waiting for you to make a move." Now it's time to face them head-on. Jinna's stomach twisted at the thought of facing whoever had been tracking her, but she knew there was no turning back. She was already in this. There was no other way. "Where do we go?" she asked. Lucien's gaze darkened, and he turned to walk toward the door. "The only place we can. The old city. The place where it all started. The heart of the darkness that's been hunting you." Jinna felt a lump form in her throat. The old city. The rumors surrounding it had always been unsettling, stories of dark magic, of things that shouldn't be. But she knew that facing this would be her only chance to end it. She had to stop running. As they walked through the city streets, the air felt heavy, like the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Lucien walked beside her, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. She could feel the energy in the air growing thicker, as if the city itself was alive with ancient power waiting for them. The closer they got to the heart of the city, the more Jinna could sense the energy shifting. It was like a storm was building just beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. They stopped in front of an old, crumbling building, one that looked as though it had been abandoned for centuries. The entrance was covered in ivy, and the door was slightly ajar, as if inviting them inside. Lucien turned to her, his expression serious. "This is where it all ends," he said. Jinna took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. She nodded, her resolve hardening. "Let's do this." Together, they stepped into the darkness. The inside of the building was cold and silent, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. Jinna could feel the power in the room, ancient and overwhelming, like a presence that had been waiting for them. Lucien led her deeper into the building, and as they moved, Jinna's senses went on high alert. Every step felt heavier, as if the very walls were closing in on them. She could feel eyes on her, watching her every move. Suddenly, the room erupted in movement. Shadows shifted around them, and from the darkness, figures began to emerge. They were tall, cloaked in black, their eyes glowing with a cold, inhuman light. Jinna's heart raced as she took a step back, but Lucien was already standing firm beside her, his eyes locked on the figures. "They've come for you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Stay focused, Jinna. Don't let them take control." The figures circled them, their eyes burning with malice. Jinna's fear surged, but she pushed it down, focusing on the energy within her. She could feel it building inside her, the power she had been learning to control. She was ready. The first figure lunged at her, but with a swift motion, Jinna thrust her hand forward. A wave of energy shot out, sending the figure flying back into the wall. The force of it shocked her, but she didn't have time to react. Another figure rushed toward her, and this time, she was ready. With a deep breath, she focused, calling on the energy she had harnessed. Her hands glowed with light, and when the figure came too close, she sent a burst of energy directly at it. The figure screamed in agony as the light enveloped it, disintegrating into nothing. Lucien stepped forward, his own energy crackling in the air. "Keep going, Jinna," he urged, his voice commanding. She nodded, determined. They were not going to stop her now. The battle raged on, each strike from Jinna pushing back the dark forces that had come for her. With every move, she felt stronger, more in control, as if the power within her was becoming part of who she was. And with each figure that fell, she could feel the storm inside her building, ready to break free. This was only the beginning. The battle inside the crumbling building raged on, and Jinna's heart was pounding in her chest as the dark figures continued to advance. The energy that flowed through her body had become second nature now. The power she had only just begun to comprehend, a force that was no longer foreign to her. She could feel it, raw and untamed, ready to break free with each pulse of her heartbeat. The first figure she had struck down dissolved into nothingness, but the others were relentless. They were fast, and their movements seemed almost otherworldly, fueled by a dark magic that matched the intensity of Jinna's own growing power. Lucien was beside her, his own aura crackling with energy, striking down his own foes with swift, controlled bursts of force. Despite his strength, Jinna could see the tension in his posture. This wasn't just another battle. This was the culmination of everything he had been preparing her for. "Focus," Lucien shouted, his voice commanding but calm. "Feel the energy around you. Control it. Let it guide you." Jinna nodded, though her breath came in short, ragged gasps. She could feel the temperature in the room drop with every strike, the air thick with the power that the dark figures exuded. But this was her fight now, her battle to win. The next figure lunged at her, its eyes burning with cold fire. Jenna's heart raced, but she held her ground, focusing on the energy inside her. The figure swung a sharp blade, its movement too fast to track with the eye. But Jenna was ready. With a deep breath, she lifted her hands, palms open, and called on the energy that was now a part of her. It surged through her fingertips like electricity, and with a single motion, she pushed it forward. A bright flash of light exploded from her hands, sending the figure flying backward, crashing into the stone wall. The force of the impact sent a shock wave through the room, shaking the walls and knocking debris loose from the ceiling. Jenna stood still for a moment, her body trembling with the exertion, but a sense of triumph washed over her. She had done it, but the battle was far from over. More figures emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted in anger and hunger. Lucien had taken down several, but there were too many for either of them to handle alone. Jenna knew they needed to finish this, and fast. She could feel the power building inside her, stronger than it had ever been. With each moment, it felt like she was tapping into something deeper, something older. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was attacking. She wasn't just protecting herself. She was becoming the force she was meant to be. A new figure appeared in front of her, taller and more powerful than the others. This one was different, its eyes glowing with a deep red light, and its presence radiated pure malice. Jenna felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know who or what this figure was, but she knew it was the one who had been pulling the strings, the leader of the darkness that had been hunting her. It was time. Lucien stepped forward, positioning himself between Jenna and the figure. "Stay back," he ordered, his voice firm, but Jenna could sense the tension in his words. "This one is mine." Jenna hesitated for only a moment, then stepped back, watching the two powerful forces collide. Lucien's energy collided with the dark figures, the two forces colliding in an explosion of light and shadow. Jenna could see the struggle, the battle of wills, but she didn't have time to wait. She had to act. The energy inside her surged once more, and without thinking, she reached out, extending her arms toward the battle. Her power twisted and bent, a force that seemed to be alive as it poured from her and toward the dark figure. She could feel it taking shape, the energy swirling around her like a storm. Lucien's voice reached her ears. "Jenna, no." But it was too late. The energy Jenna had summoned was now fully in her control, a force of pure light that surged through the room. It twisted and pulsed, wrapping around the dark figure like a chain, pulling it back, tightening its grip. The figure screamed in frustration, but Jenna's power was too much for it to overcome. She could feel the darkness starting to fade, being pushed back by the light she had created. Lucien turned, his eyes wide with shock and something else, pride, maybe, but also concern. He knew how dangerous this was. Jenna didn't stop. She couldn't. The power inside her was too strong, and it was no longer just about protecting herself. It was about ending this once and for all. The figure struggled, but it was weakening, its red eyes flickering as the light surrounded it, its form flickering in and out of existence. With a final burst of energy, Jenna pushed forward, and the figure collapsed into nothingness. The room fell silent. The air was still. Lucien stared at her, his breath coming in short bursts. He looked at her as if he had seen a side of her he had never expected. Jenna stood, panting, her body exhausted but alive with energy. The room was filled with the aftershock of what had just happened, the remnants of the battle still lingering in the air. Lucien stepped toward her, his face serious. "You did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "You've unlocked your true power." Jenna's heart still raced, but there was a quiet pride in her chest. She had done it. She had faced the darkness, and she had won. But she knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The silence that followed the battle was deafening. The dark figure that had been threatening Jenna was now nothing more than a faint trace in the air, the remnants of its malevolent energy dissipating into nothingness. Lucien stood in front of her, his posture still tense, but his eyes filled with a deep, unspoken pride. Jenna could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The room around her still hummed with the energy she had just unleashed. Her chest heaved with each breath, and her body ached from the intensity of the fight. But there was something else there too, something deeper. A realization that she was no longer just a food truck girl. She was something more now, something she couldn't yet fully understand. Lucien slowly approached her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You did it, Jenna," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with awe. "You defeated it. You've proven you have the strength, the power, to face whatever comes next." Jenna swallowed hard, trying to process his words. The adrenaline from the fight was slowly starting to wear off, and in its place, a flood of emotions rushed in. She was exhausted, but there was a rush of exhilaration too. She had faced down the darkness that had been hunting her, and she had won. But there was more to come. She knew that now. She could feel it deep inside her. "I didn't do it alone," Jenna replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were with me. You helped me." Lucien gave her a small smile, a rare expression that softened his usually unreadable features. "True. But you've always had this power inside you, Jenna. I merely helped you find it." Jenna nodded slowly, her eyes still scanning the room as she tried to make sense of everything that had happened. She was standing in the aftermath of a battle she had never imagined herself fighting, surrounded by the remnants of something ancient and dark, something that seemed far beyond her comprehension. But she had done it. She had faced it, and she had emerged victorious. But even as the initial rush of victory settled, she knew that this was only the beginning. The feeling in the air hadn't gone away. There was more to come, and it was coming fast. Lucien stepped closer to her, his eyes sharp with intent. "This is only the start, Jenna," he said, his voice low and commanding. "The forces that have been hunting you will not stop. They are regrouping, and soon they will be stronger than ever. We have to be ready." Jenna looked at him, a mix of determination and uncertainty in her eyes. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady, but her mind still racing. Lucien placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but comforting. "Now we prepare. You've unlocked your power, but you still need to learn how to control it fully. We'll continue training, but you also need to learn to read the signs, to understand the ancient magic that runs through your veins. There are secrets hidden in your bloodline, and you need to know them before the darkness comes for you again." Jenna nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had no choice now. She couldn't go back to the life she had before, not after everything she had learned. The world she knew was gone, and she had to face the reality that she was now a part of something far bigger than she ever imagined. As they left the building and stepped out into the night, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a new world, one that was filled with danger, but also with possibility. She had the power to protect herself now, but it wasn't enough. She had to be ready for what was coming. She couldn't afford to be weak, not anymore. Lucien turned to her as they walked down the dark street. "You're not alone in this," he said, his voice softer now. "I'll be with you every step of the way, but you'll need to trust yourself. Jenna, you've proven you can do this. You just have to believe in yourself." Jenna felt a strange sense of resolve settle in her chest. She wasn't alone. Lucien was by her side, but more than that, she was beginning to understand her own strength, the strength she had carried inside her all along. They walked through the quiet streets, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the night. Jenna's mind raced with the possibilities, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready to face whatever darkness the world might throw at her. Because she knew now, deep down, that she wasn't just Jenna. She was something more. And no matter what came next, she would be ready. The days following their narrow victory in the dark building felt like a quiet before the storm. Jenna had settled into a routine of constant training with Lucien, refining her control over the power she had unearthed. The city around her seemed unchanged. Life moved on as normal, but she could feel the undercurrent of something darker and more dangerous drawing closer. Lucien had been right about one thing. She was no longer the person she used to be. Every day felt like a new beginning, yet the weight of what was to come pressed heavily on her chest. She was training harder, pushing herself further than she ever thought possible. Her days were filled with physical drills, learning how to move faster, how to anticipate attacks, and how to harness the raw energy inside her. At night, Lucien would teach her the ancient magic tied to her bloodline. She learned to read symbols, to connect with the unseen forces that flowed around her, and to channel her power into focused, controlled bursts. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. Lucian was teaching her that the real challenge was not the fight itself, it was the preparation. The darkness that had been lurking in the shadows was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. It's not about fighting them head-on, Lucian had explained one night, as they stood under the dim light of the old city's abandoned streets. It's about outthinking them. You're not just fighting physical opponents, you're fighting their manipulation, their strategy. You need to be prepared for that. Jenna nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never been a strategist, but she was learning fast. They couldn't afford to be reckless. The enemy was powerful, and every move had to be calculated. A few days later, as Jenna was finishing her training for the day, Lucian arrived with an urgency in his step. His eyes, usually so calm, were now sharp with concern. Jenna, it's time. They've made their move. Her heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, a cold knot of fear settled in her stomach. What do you mean? What happened? Lucian's jaw tightened as he glanced around, making sure no one was watching them. The dark forces have been tracking us. And now, they've found our location. They're not coming for you. They're coming for everyone. We need to act fast. Jenna felt the gravity of his words. It wasn't just her anymore. It was the people she cared about, the world she had left behind, and everyone who was caught in the crossfire of this battle she didn't ask for. What do we do? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear threatening to overwhelm her. Lucian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze locked with hers. We strike first. The plan Lucian laid out was simple in theory, but Jenna knew it would be anything but easy. They were going to infiltrate the heart of the enemy's territory. They would strike where they believed their enemies were weakest, disrupting their plans before they could escalate. It was dangerous. It was reckless, but it was their only chance. Are you ready? Lucian asked, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. Jenna felt the familiar surge of power coursing through her, the energy that had become an extension of herself. It was no longer something she feared, it was part of her. I'm ready, she said, her voice unwavering. They moved quickly through the dark streets, Lucian leading the way with confidence. Jenna followed closely behind, her senses heightened, feeling every shift in the air, every movement in the shadows. The night was quiet, too quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. Lucian's pace quickened as they reached an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The same place where she had first felt the pull of darkness weeks ago. Jenna's heart beat faster as they approached. She could feel the weight of the impending confrontation, the uncertainty of what lay beyond the doors. Lucian turned to her, his expression serious. This is it. Stay focused and trust yourself. Whatever happens, we can't let them gain the upper hand. Jenna nodded, her throat dry but her resolve firm. This was it. The final test. Together, they pushed the heavy door open. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the atmosphere charged with a dark energy that almost seemed to hum. The building was empty, or so it appeared, but Jenna could sense the presence of something, or someone, hidden in the shadows. Lucian moved silently, his footsteps barely making a sound as he led the way deeper into the building. Jenna followed, her every instinct on high alert. They reached the center of the warehouse, and Lucian suddenly stopped, turning to face her. Stay here, he whispered. I'll go first. You wait for my signal. Jenna opened her mouth to protest, but Lucian placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze firm. Trust me, Jenna. I need you to be ready when the time comes. She swallowed her words and nodded. Lucian disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone in the eerie silence. The minutes stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Jenna could feel the tension building, the air growing heavier with each passing moment. Then, without warning, the silence was broken. A sharp, guttural laugh echoed through the warehouse, followed by the sound of footsteps approaching. Jenna's heart raced as she prepared herself. This was it, the moment she had been training for. She wasn't just Jenna anymore. She was a protector, and she was going to fight like one. The moment the guttural laugh echoed through the dark warehouse, Jenna's instincts kicked into overdrive. Her body was tense, every fiber of her being primed for the fight that was about to unfold. She could feel the energy building inside her, the power that had become second nature to her over the past few weeks. She was ready. The darkness in the air seemed to thicken, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. It felt suffocating, and for a brief moment, she thought she might be overwhelmed. But she pushed the thought away. Lucien's words rang in her mind. Trust yourself. Stay focused. She took a deep breath and steadied herself. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, cloaked in black, its movements fluid and predatory. Its eyes glowed a piercing red, and a cruel smile twisted its features. The figure paused for a moment, studying Jenna with cold, calculating eyes. So, you've come to face me, little protector, the figure said, its voice like ice scraping against stone. Jenna stood her ground, not backing down. She wasn't just some ordinary girl anymore. She had power, and she was going to use it. I'm not afraid of you, she said, her voice steady, though she could feel her heart hammering in her chest. The figure chuckled darkly, stepping closer, its form shifting in the shadows. You should be, it said, its voice dripping with venom. You have no idea what you're up against. Jenna's mind raced as the figure continued to circle her, its presence almost suffocating. The air around them crackled with energy, and she could feel the dark magic pulsating from it. But she didn't move. She couldn't let it get into her head. She had faced the darkness before, and she would do it again. The figure lunged at her, its movements swift and deadly. Jenna's body reacted instinctively. She raised her hands, and a surge of light erupted from her palms, slamming into the figure and sending it flying back. The force of the blast left her breathless, but she quickly regained her composure. The figure got to its feet, snarling in anger, its eyes now glowing even brighter. Impressive, it said, its voice low and dangerous. But you're still too weak. You can't defeat me. Jenna clenched her fists, feeling the energy inside her swirling. The power was there, just beneath the surface, ready to be unleashed. She focused on it, pulling it up, channeling it into her hands. I'm not weak, she said, her voice filled with determination. I'm not afraid of you, and I won't let you destroy everything I care about. The figure hissed, its eyes narrowing. You're naive. You have no idea what you're truly up against. You think you can stop me? You're just a pawn in a much larger game. Jenna's pulse quickened, but she didn't let the figure's words shake her. She was more than just a pawn. She was more than she had ever been, and she wasn't going to let it win. With a roar, the figure charged at her again, its claws outstretched. Jenna pushed all of her energy into her hands, the light blinding as she released it in a powerful wave. The force collided with the figure, throwing it back once more. But this time, the figure didn't get up. It writhed in the air, its body convulsing as the light around it intensified. Jenna focused on the energy, willing it to keep growing, to push back the darkness once and for all. The figure screamed, its voice echoing through the room as the light consumed it. Jenna didn't stop. She couldn't. She poured every ounce of her energy into the blast, determined to end this fight. The figure's screams grew louder, then suddenly stopped. There was a moment of silence before the darkness in the room began to fade. The air felt lighter, the oppressive presence that had filled the warehouse lifting. Jenna's breathing was heavy, her body trembling with exhaustion. She had done it. She had defeated it. But as the last of the darkness evaporated, she realized something. This wasn't over. The victory felt hollow, like a temporary relief, a moment of peace before the storm hit again. The figure was gone, but there were more out there. Lucien had warned her. This was just the beginning. She turned to where Lucien had been, but he was nowhere in sight. Her heart skipped a beat. Lucien, she called out, her voice echoing in the empty room. Silence answered her. She hurriedly made her way through the warehouse, every step heavy with fear. What had happened? Where was he? As she reached the center of the building, she saw him. Lucien was standing near the far wall, his back turned to her. But something was wrong. He was motionless, and a deep sense of dread washed over her. Lucien, she called again, her voice breaking. He turned slowly, and Jenna's breath caught in her throat. His eyes were glowing a faint red, the same dark energy that had consumed the figure now radiating from him. Her heart sank. Lucien, she whispered, taking a cautious step forward. He didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at her with cold, empty eyes. The man she had trusted, the man who had helped her find her strength, was no longer the same. She could feel the darkness in him now, could feel the same coldness that had consumed their enemies. "What have they done to you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and disbelief. Lucien didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step toward her. The air around them crackled with the same dark energy that had threatened to consume her. Jenna took a step back, her heart racing. This wasn't the Lucien she knew. This wasn't the man who had trained her, who had been by her side. This was something else. And now, the fight was personal. The energy in the room shifted with every step Lucien took toward Jenna. His once confident, calm demeanor had been replaced by something dark, something cold. His eyes glowed faintly red, and the power that had once radiated from him in a comforting way now felt dangerous and unpredictable. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest as she took a step back, her breath shallow. The man she had trusted, the one who had helped her unlock her own strength, now seemed like a stranger. "Lucien," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and fear. "What happened to you?" He didn't respond. His gaze remained fixed on her, unblinking, almost empty. The warmth she had once seen in his eyes was gone, replaced by a chilling, cold intensity. "You shouldn't have done this," he muttered, his voice low and emotionless. Jenna felt a wave of dread wash over her as she realized the truth. The darkness she had fought, the one that had been hunting her, had somehow found its way into Lucien. She had known the danger was real, but this was something she hadn't anticipated. Lucien's hand moved, and the air around him seemed to pulse with dark energy. She could feel it, like a weight pressing against her chest, choking the air out of her lungs. "Lucien, please," she pleaded, stepping back. "This isn't you. Fight it." He didn't seem to hear her. His expression remained blank, his eyes glowing brighter with each passing second. "I have fought for so long," he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Fought for you. For all of this. But the truth is, I am not in control anymore. I never was." His words hit her like a slap. She had thought Lucien was always in control. He had always been the one guiding her, showing her how to unlock her potential. But now, standing before her, he seemed like a shadow of the man she had come to rely on. "No," Jenna said firmly, shaking her head as she backed further away. "You're still in there. I know you are. This isn't who you are." Lucien's face twisted into a grin, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was something darker, colder. "You think you know me?" he asked, his voice growing more menacing. "You think you know what I've been through, what I've sacrificed, the things I've done to protect you? You have no idea." Jenna's heart ached as she saw the torment in his eyes, the pain that was now hidden beneath the darkness. But she couldn't give up on him. "Not now. I know you're still in there," she said, more confidently this time. "I know you're not lost. You can fight this. We can fight this together." Lucien's smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of something, doubt maybe, passing through his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. He raised his hand, and the room around them seemed to darken. "You don't understand," he said, his voice colder than ever. "I've already made my choice." The air crackled with energy as Lucien moved toward her. Jenna felt a pulse of power surge through her, and instinctively, she raised her hands, ready to defend herself. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. "Lucien, please," she begged, her voice desperate now. "Don't do this." But Lucien didn't stop. He was too far gone, consumed by the darkness that had taken hold of him. His power surged, and the room seemed to bend under its weight. Jenna closed her eyes for a split second, her mind racing for a way out. She had to find a way to reach him. She couldn't give up. Not yet. When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. She could feel it. There was a shift in the air, a subtle change, as if something had snapped into place. Lucien had stopped moving. He stood still, frozen in place, his eyes still glowing. But now there was something different in them. Something familiar. Jenna stepped forward slowly, cautiously, her heart beating faster with hope. "Lucien," she whispered. His lips parted, but instead of the cold, emotionless words she had expected, he spoke in a voice that was almost apologetic. "Jenna, his voice trailed off, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she saw a flicker of the man she had known, the man she had trusted. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. Jenna felt a surge of relief. It wasn't too late. He wasn't lost. Not entirely. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling as they hovered near him. "Lucien," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "We can fight this together. I believe in you. We can stop it." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Lucien didn't move. Then, finally, he lowered his head, his hand dropping to his side as the glow in his eyes began to dim. "I never wanted this," he said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." Jenna took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "I know," she said gently. "I know you didn't." Lucien's shoulders slumped, the weight of the darkness still pressing on him. But now, it was manageable. It was fading. "I've been fighting it for so long, but I couldn't," he trailed off, his words heavy with regret. "I didn't want to lose you." Jenna's heart swelled. She reached out, her hand finding his. It was warm, familiar, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel the dark energy that had consumed him. "You won't lose me," she said softly. "We'll face this together." Lucien squeezed her hand, his grip firm and steady once more. "Together," he agreed, the darkness retreating for the moment. But Jenna knew they weren't done. This wasn't over. The battle was far from finished. But now, they had each other. And together, they would face whatever came next. The air around Jenna and Lucien seemed to hum with a quiet, newfound calm. The darkness that had threatened to tear them apart was retreating, and in its place, there was an undeniable sense of unity between them. But Jenna knew that this was not the end. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The forces that sought to destroy her, to control her, were still out there, gathering strength. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. She could feel the power in her veins, not as a burden, but as a gift. Lucien stood beside her, his presence now a source of comfort rather than danger. She had saved him from the darkness, and in doing so, she had unlocked a part of herself she never knew existed. Together, they were stronger. Together, they were unstoppable. "What now?" Jenna asked quietly, her voice steady despite the weight of the future pressing on her. Lucien turned to her, his gaze filled with a rare warmth, a sense of gratitude that she had not seen before. "Now," he said softly, "we prepare. The darkness won't just stop because we've defeated one of its agents. It will keep coming, and we need to be ready." Jenna nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. There was so much more to learn, so much more to understand. But she wasn't alone anymore. Lucien was with her, and together they would face whatever came next. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her voice filled with determination. Lucien smiled faintly. "We need to gather our allies, find the others who can help us. We can't fight this alone. And we need to uncover the full truth of your bloodline, your heritage. There are things you don't know yet, things that could change everything." Jenna's heart raced. The thought of uncovering more secrets, of learning even more about the power she carried, both terrified and excited her. She had already changed so much, and yet she knew there was so much more to discover. "I'm ready," she said, her voice unwavering. "Whatever it takes." Lucien nodded, his eyes filled with pride. "I knew you were ready the moment we started this journey. But we have to be careful. There are forces at play that are more powerful than we can imagine. We can't let our guard down." Together, they turned and walked back into the shadows of the city, the weight of the world heavy on their shoulders. Jenna had never felt more alive. The air around her was charged with energy, and the world ahead felt full of possibility. She was no longer the scared girl working a food truck. She was a protector, a warrior, and she would fight to protect everything she loved. As they moved through the darkened streets, Lucien spoke again, his voice low. "We'll have to go to the old temple in the mountains. There's knowledge there, knowledge that's been kept hidden for centuries. It's our best chance at learning more about your bloodline, about how we can defeat the darkness for good." Jenna felt a surge of determination. The road ahead would be dangerous, but she was ready for it. There was no turning back now. "Then let's go," she said firmly. Lucien's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw something more than just the powerful protector he had been. She saw the man who had chosen to stand by her side, to help her, despite the darkness that had nearly consumed him. "You're not alone in this, Jenna," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "We'll do this together." And in that moment, Jenna knew that no matter what came next, they would face it as one. The road would be long, the challenges endless, but they would fight for each other, for the world, for the future. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were taking control of their destiny, and nothing, no darkness, no enemy, could stand in their way. The final battle was still ahead of them, but for the first time, Jinnah felt that they had the strength to win. And no matter how dark the world became, they would face it together,